It's 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As ever, I'd just like to remind everybody present that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. Item 1 is to receive apologies for absence. I haven't received any apologies. Claire, we have any apologies? I think we're all present and correct. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest? No declarations, thank you. Item 3 relates to unplanned, it relates to unplanned scrutiny business. There isn't any that I've been notified of. Again, I'll just defer to Claire in case she's had any requests. No, thank you very much. So item 4 then is Greater Essex Local Government Reorganisation Update, which is at pages 5 to 22 of the agenda. I'd like to invite the leader to introduce the item, and then Alex and Patrick, I think, will come in and make their contribution before we move to questions. So over to the leader.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, first of all, for allowing me to come back and brief the committee again on developments. So at the last meeting, I said as leader I wanted to be open, transparent and work on the LGR and devolution proposals, and I'm pleased to address you on the latest developments since the last time that I was at your committee. I want to say again that local government reorganisation is a decision that will be taken by government, not by me, not by this council or any other council, but the Secretary of State. They can only choose a model which is actually on the table, and I thought that neither the 5 nor the 4 model had Thurrock's best interest at heart, so I asked officers to consider what a model of 4 would look like. The main development to update members on this evening is that work has been identified as the strongest geography for the 4 model for the 4 new unitaries. They are West Essex Unitary, made up of Thurrock, Brentwood, Epping Forest and Harlow. North Essex Unitary, made up of Chelmsford, Uttlesford and Braintree. The East Essex Unitary, including Colchester, Tendring and Malden. And South Essex Unitary, made up of Southend, Basildon, Castle Point and Rochford. This configuration is based on a detailed assessment of the significant financial and service data available to us. We looked at the proposals being put forward by colleagues in Essex County Council and Southend. I understand there are arguments in favour for either financial sustainability or sensible geography. But the 4 model takes the strengths of both and creates the right balance. I believe that this is what is best for Thurrock and for the rest of Essex. But this is not a done deal. We are engaging with residents on what is important to them, and we want to hear from the committee members your thoughts. As we develop this further, I want to remind the committee of the questions that we spoke about last meeting. Does the committee feel that there are any particular community considerations that we should be focusing on? Does the committee feel that there are any regional infrastructure or build environment considerations we should be reflecting? Does the committee feel that there are any particular data or metrics to consider as part of our evidence base? Sharing your thoughts on those questions would be incredibly helpful to continue the work on our proposal and the business case. There is now a timetable since the last meeting that the government has set out between the proposals being submitted and the new authorities going live. Consultation on proposals will be between November and early spring next year. Decisions on the proposal by March 2026. Secondary legislation in the autumn of 2026. Elections to new authorities in shadow form on the 6th of May 2027. New authorities go live on the 1st of April 2028. As it came up at the last meeting, this information does not change my view on the elections. They are scheduled for next year and we are planning for them to take place. Last night, so we've also been doing engagement, and last night I hosted an online webinar for the public, and I'm hosting a session at the Thames Side Fair to discuss local government reform. Please all attend if you can, if there's you want to see what the residents are asking. In addition, we are attending all the big lunches, the borough to seek the borough's views. We are also holding conversation with residents in libraries, community events, sheltered housing complexes and anywhere else that we can possibly be this summer. We welcome feedback from members, staff and the wider community. I'd also like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that our online consultation, which we will be using to inform our proposal, is still open and can be found on our website. This is on top of all of the consultation government will be doing running from November on all of the accepted proposals ahead of the final decision on which model they will be taking forward. We want to keep listening and let the views of the community shape our final proposal before we submit it to government in September. Finally, before I finish, if you do have questions or you want to meet with officers on a one-to-one basis, please do reach out. If you don't feel like there's a question that you want to ask here tonight that you feel comfortable asking, then please go and seek out Alex or Patrick, to go through any of the workings with you. I do not want to get to the end of this consultation for any of the 49 councillors to say that they never had an opportunity to feed into this proposal. I have been open, I have been transparent, I have encouraged everybody at every opportunity to take part in this. The working group, all of the extra meetings here at Overview and Scrutiny, in the chamber. There has been so much work done on this, so please, please engage, see the officers. If you don't feel like this has got something in there tonight that you think, oh, I really want to ask that, but I don't want to ask it, then please make your appointment to go and speak to one of the officers. And that's for any councillors that are watching online. And that's a message that I intend to keep putting out. This is our proposal. It's not my proposal, it's ours. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Alex or Patrick next? Alex.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, committee. It's good to be back here talking about local government reorganisation. I hope that you found the paper and the annexes useful that we prepared this time. We've tried to include as much detail as possible. I don't intend I'm happy to go through every element of that detail if you wish, but there are certain aspects of it I'd like to just draw to your attention, which I hopefully will help aid future discussion and questions. We all know that there is the proposal for the 5 model, where, as the leader said, we had some concerns there around the financial viability of that model, but it also had some merits around the scale of it, a sense of being closer to communities, but overall it wasn't viable for Thurrock. We now have the Essex proposal, Essex County Council proposal, I should say, which is very much about efficiency and scale, which I think drives a particular agenda, but then you lose that sense of community. It then poses problems around the amalgamation of 3 social care systems in one southern authority. So it became clear that we needed to look at an alternative viable option for 4. Hence we have the 4 that you have before you. We have conducted some analysis aligning as much data as we have against what we think is the criteria that the government would like us to build a business case on, to come up with what we feel is the right 4 model that balances a number of different competing pressures and opportunities. And I think it's important to recognise that there is no one perfect answer when it comes to local government reorganisation. If it was as simple as that, we wouldn't necessarily have a choice and the Treasury would just impose it. There are competing options, there are different views, and you can put different weightings on what you think is important and not. But we have tried to be as balanced as possible. So as I turn to Annex A to the paper, you will see there that we provided you with some of the demographic and financial analysis that we conducted across Greater Essex. And there are a few things that I just wanted to draw to your attention, if I may. The first is the first slide, which is about financial sustainability. And it's just really to consider the financial viability of communities and the type of community that we have. And GVA is a measure to understand how prosperous, how viable an area is. You might want to say how wealthy it is, the average kind of level of wealth per capita. And as you'll see from the colour coding, those authorities that are closer to London have a slightly higher financial footing than those that are further away from London. But actually what was really quite stark when we looked at this is that there were some rare areas of serious low levels of income actually. When we know about tendering, but actually when we looked towards Southend and Castle Point and Rochford, it was really in the very, very high teens, rather than some other areas where it's mid-30s up to £41,000. So when you're looking at building an authority, for example in the 5 model, based in the southeast, you're actually putting it on, if it was just those 3 councils, a really weak financial footing. So if there's any downturn in the economy, a little bit of an increase in unemployment, dare I say more burdens placed on us by central government, you're going to struggle. It's really going to be difficult for that local authority to really, really move forward. So we realised that we had to strike a decent balance here to make sure that each of those 4 local authorities were viable from day one and into the long term. The other series of slides I want to take you on to is the health profile summary. Now these indicate a number of different factors that you need to consider when you're looking at the health and well-being of a community. Child health, for example, health protection, health inequalities, and you'll see that there is a pattern there. Some change across different communities, but what we took away from this is you can generally see 4 areas of where there are particular concerns around health inequalities, life expectancy, and they tend to fall within 4 areas. Not always consistent, but it tends to be Harlow, Thurrock, Basildon, Tendering, and some parts of Southend. Again, it's about amalgamating this data and thinking it's about balancing those demands that you place upon on a council that has to tackle some of the issues that we know that underlines these statistics. I want to just turn to Annex B, because I said I'd be short with this presentation, and I think this is the important thing I wanted to highlight, is that we're being very open and transparent about the metrics and the analysis that underlies the conclusion that we reached around the 4. And here you have it compared against the 3 and the 5. And as you go down here, and I'm more than happy to take questions, you can look at it and see, well, actually, what is this telling us? And in each of these scenarios, the authority, which is UA1, is Thurrock. Now, as the leader said, and as I've just reiterated, there's no one simple pure answer to this, but it's about finding that balance. So I can tell you that there are certain things under these categories where the 3 unitary model is really good. It works very, very well. It gives a relatively sensible, even distribution of GVA per capita, for example, relatively balanced. It has a relatively balanced over 65 population. It creates 2, relatively balanced authorities in terms of financing debt. But it again doesn't pick up the fact that you are creating, if you look at population, authorities of 730,000 people, which are huge, very large, and will feel quite remote when you're sat there in your small community, in your village, your town, and your local authorities covering quite a large geography. I would argue that's one of the criticisms people have, not the only one, of the county council versus your district. And isn't the whole emphasis behind what the government is trying to do here is to end that 2-tier government and that big overarching county and smaller authorities underneath. So to move to a model that has such vast populations doesn't feel quite as balanced. But there are other areas when we look at the 4 unitary model where again that's much stronger. It's a more even population spread and it's a more sustainable population nearer the 500,000. which we think helps unlock things like devolution. So devolution is about working as an upper tier authority with your partners, as I've mentioned before. But we all have a vote as to whether we agree or not. And if you have one authority that's much larger than two others, for example, or one other, it's going to feel very uneven, and you'll get arguments. You know, we can see that elsewhere in the country. But if you're creating unitary authorities that are again balanced in terms of size, population, it's a more even keel to have devolution. And there are good things about the 5 unitary model. As I said, it is much closer. It's a geography that we would recognise across the entirety of Greater Essex. But there are other things that underlie, you know, that really give it away as not being particularly sustainable. The target was 500,000, but actually the populations for 5, it's between 320 up to 380. That's very low, and it's very concerning that what will it be fine on day 1? What about day 2, day 3, when it has to deal with the day-to-day challenges? So the data is here. It is a mixed picture, but you have to look at it in the round against the criteria that the government has set. And we feel that on that basis, the geography that we've set out for Model 4, we think speaks to something that everyone across Greater Essex, but particularly, hopefully, residents in Thurrock, will feel works for them and creates a system of local government that is fit for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Patrick, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nothing to add at this point, thank you, Chair, but happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up to questions and comments from members. Who wants to go? Councillor Howden.
Thanks, Councillor Maney. Thanks, Leader. Thank you, Alex. A question, a comment. But my comment is that I've said this a couple of times in the meetings that Councillor Holloway chairs. I still consider it to be utterly arbitrary to say that we want to create councils that feel close to their communities. You are never ever going to achieve that. For those of us who represent seats in the east, Stamford and Corringham's got a population of about 35,000. The people of Stamford and Corringham don't feel they've got much in common with Aveley anymore. They've got anything in common with Malden, Harlow, Epping. The reality is it doesn't matter if your council is 200,000, 900,000 or 100,000. We all represent individual communities. Councillor Morris Cook represents Grays. We don't represent boroughs as a whole. We represent individual communities. So the idea that we need an additional unitary because it suddenly makes us closer, no one is ever going to recognise any council as close unless it's a parish council and incredibly localised to a specific area. So I just don't buy an argument that we need to throw in a unitary because it makes us closer or more identifiable, because it just never will. On the model that the administration has actually proposed, I see an awful lot of merit in it with regards to the health profile summary. Almost 80% of our budget is absorbed by social care. So the model that you've created gives us an extremely healthy mix of age demographic, a healthy mix of deprivation indexes, and a pretty healthy mix of where the health capacity in the system actually sits in terms of what PCN areas have actually got capacity to see more patients and keep them out of the care system. The slide that I've asked for several times and it's never appeared is the exact thing that you've showed us with the wider determinants of health, but for the people who are actually self-funding their own social care. So, broadly speaking, in Thurrock, about 5% of our population fund their own care. In the Essex County Council area, it's about 54%, so 10 times higher than us. That's the meat of the coconut. I know everyone gets obsessed with health inequalities, but health inequalities go down or up based on what you determined an inequality to be. What actually matters, what actually impacts our bank account directly, is how many people in the area pay for their own care when they enter the system. Why can't we have that slide? I've asked for it for almost 4.5 months now. We've got to see where people are, who's paying for their own care. Health inequalities by themselves doesn't actually confer a direct financial number. So if you showed me that your model takes us above that 5% that Thurrock has always been stuck in, I appreciate we won't get to the 54%-ish that the county area is in, but if it gets us into the low to high 20s, then I would really be quite happy with this model. But why can't we see that?
I have no objection to you seeing that. We will gather the information and send it to you. There's no reason why you can't. I can't give you an answer as to whether it lifts us over the magic 20% or whatever level you want. But by looking at these, looking at the indices of both deprivation, wealth, as well as the health ones, the assumption that you can make, which is relatively sound, and I'm saying an assumption rather than drawing on the exact data that you've asked for, is that it will, by definition, lift us above the 5%, because the areas that have problems with self-funders tends to be Tendering, Castle Point, Thurrock and Harlow. They're the areas where there tends to be a lot of, sorry, not self-funders, those that, a low percentage of those that are self-funders. So it follows those trends that we've got here, but I will happily gather that information for you and send it to the committee. Not a problem.
And just on the small p politics of this, obviously we would like to get into a position where we can gain allies for whatever model we put forward. The big strategic problem I see in us losing allies in your model is the third cluster that you've created, Colchester, Tendring and Malden. Colchester, Tendring and Braintree have been in a cooperative between the three of them for a very long time, and they've actually remastered a huge amount of their actual health and care infrastructure, especially on bed capacity, which is a massive chunk of local authority spend, and they've already got that system pretty well developed. So my concern with our model is that breaking what they've already got that already works for them seems to be just deliberately losing us friends. If there was anything we could do to produce a four model authority, if there was anything that we could do to try and keep that system that they've built for themselves intact, then I think that could take them from being opposed to what we want to perhaps being agnostic to what we want. I don't think we're ever going to get them on side, but I don't think we need to needlessly lose friends.
So it is a very good point. There is close cooperation between those three authorities. There is close cooperation between Brentwood and Rochford, for example, with shared services. There is close cooperation between Harlow, Epping and Uttlesford. There are existing patterns between districts across all of these different configurations, but with local government reorganisation, that they will no longer exist, and we have to think beyond existing custom and practice. I don't think it means that operationally things will be lost. I mean, that's the truth of it, and it's about building upon that. I can completely understand the small p politics, the tactics of certainly moving someone to being agnostic towards the idea. But if we were, for example, it's like a chessboard, isn't it? If you were to move Braintree into that configuration, the top not Braintree, it is Braintree, into the top three, you're then creating a new middle authority that runs from Malden, Chelmsford to Uttlesford, that has very limited connectivity, very little in common, and it doesn't quite work. So you're always, it is a bit of a zero-sum game. You move one, and it's the impact on the other, and that is the challenge. But the leader and I are meeting the leaders and the chief exec of we're seeing Braintree, Colchester, Epping, Harlow. They're in the diary to talk them through the rationale, and some of the feedback is there is common sense here. It does work, but there is always that Rubicon you have to cross about. But we've always quite done it that way. But you've got to look at the evidence and think what works, because you've got to look at that the entire picture to see what will last for the next 50 years. And it is hard. It is hard.
No, I do appreciate that. But again, ideally, if we want to win an argument, we would like people to either sign up to our model or not actively oppose it. And we will lose any support from Southend because nobody wants Basildon, because Basildon have got the same health inequalities that we've got. So they're not going to be thrilled with importing those problems. So if we then lose a load of friends in the north east of the county, then we're kind of, the ice around us is kind of shrinking.
And it does feel quite cold. I completely see that. But again, just to, I do recognise that, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm simply trying to point out that it is a complex picture, because the point about Basildon, when I started about GVA and how that impacts Rochford and how low it is with Rochford, Southend, and Castle Point. If you want a viable authority there that has some form of relatively strong economic growth and industry that can and stronger connectivity to London that can really provide that stability, that comes from Basildon. That's why it really provides that security to that area to make it viable. But it's hard choices. It is very, very hard.
Any further questions? Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks, Chair. I think one of the things that I've heard mentioned, and I think it's worth sort of bringing up, one of the key strategic areas that we're going to have to look at, and I appreciate it's mentioned here, is the whole question of housing. And it won't have escaped the notice of other boroughs that Thurrock is about 2/3 Greenbelt, or it used to be. What concerns, if any, do you have that by pairing up with more urban and more densely populated boroughs, that we might end up taking on more than our fair share of the joint housing requirement? And if you have that concern, how do you think we can avoid it?
Thank you. So obviously this was one of the key areas that we was looking at. And why did I choose this for? So there's been a whole different formats of what we could have gone for. So you have to always go back to the 500,000 and then try to work out a geography that really works for us. So for me, it was trying to work out not only what works financially, but try to look at what we've got in common with those areas. And you're absolutely right. So, all linked by the M25, the M11 corridor. So we've got like the transport corridor area, all commuter belts, people commute in and out, large numbers. But one of the significant things that I did look at, Mike, and I spent a long time looking at it, was that all four areas have large areas of greenbelt and all under a real severe pressure to grow their housing and develop on them. So there's not any areas over there that isn't. So it makes some sense for us to join, to align our housing and our growth. And this includes Harlow's got Gilston Garden Town. Brentwood's got their local plan to protect their green spaces. Thurrock, we've got about 30,000 outstanding planning applications already agreed, without any more. So again, we've got the Thames Crossing that's coming our way. So working together, I feel that we could be a real strong economic growth area, but at the same time, we could be quite vocal and stand strong about making sure that if we was to go to a council of 729,000, I think that we could easily get swallowed up by the other two and get a lot of stuff put onto us. And I looked and I thought, How many other councils have got 729,000 people? There is none. We would be the largest council. The nearest to us would be North Yorkshire with 619,000. Somerset 573, Buckinghamshire 511. So what worries me is by being that biggest council in Essex, we've had it before where Thurrock become the dumping of build it over there, chuck the industry over there, you know. So that is about, I think that we've got something on the table here that allows us to grow and prosper. So literally, I just think that there's more about us that joins us than divides us on the option that's available to us. So I think that that's how I feel about it. That I think that this is a strong option on there, you know. So making sure that we're protecting our green belt rather than rolling over and giving our green belt up.
Thank you.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. And just to chip in from the working group who fed in to a certain extent towards the decision that has now emerged on where we feel we would be going. When we first sat, not long after the white paper had been published, like Councillor Howden said, you would think geographically, and with the lines and the demarcation lines and the guidelines and the restrictions in the white paper, that the corridors of the M11, the M25, the A13 and the A127, it jumps off the page. Well, this is going to be a walk in a park, and this is going to be wrapped up within 2 meetings, and our recommendation is going to go off to the government, who once again, to reiterate what the leader said, the decision will not be made amongst here. This is effectively a recommendation based on the data that we and the officers have sifted through. However, the backdrop of what the white paper said when we were thinking on this very narrow brief, only 2 items on our agendas when we were meeting in confidence with Councillor Cockshaw, Councillor Spade, leaders from across the parties. Once we were sifting through the data, giving the debt, giving forward sustainability, all of the things that have been mentioned around this table up to now and the months leading up to this were all considered. And it wasn't then ruling in what you would think, because we'd already ruled in the 3. It was then what are you going to be pretty much ruling out. And the leader's absolutely right. And the devolution white paper, it does set a minimum of 500,000 population. That's what we would be heading for. It doesn't set an upper limit. But what we don't want to do is set any records and completely lose touch of what we're going to do as a council. So, although the decision wasn't made by us, the data that we got kind of lent our group to support it to a certain extent. Now, I know Councillor Cockshaw doesn't share that view, and that will be for the government to decide. But this isn't an easy task. That's why we're all sat here. But ultimately, we've got to go what we think is the best thing for Thurrock. And I would like to think that when we do submit, we are submitting from the same song sheet. But that's about it, Chair. The documentation that you've got in front of you pretty much speaks for itself.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for your presentations. Just a quick comment first of all on the report that we were sent. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of a narrative as to why we opted for the 4 authority model. In the report, we've got a section on rationale for the preferred 4 unitary authority configuration that sort of sets it out and then kind of refers you to the data. But the trouble is, as you mentioned, the data can sort of tell you whatever you want. I looked at it and thought, oh, that's good on 5, that's good on 3. So I would have liked to have seen a sort of more joined up sort of narrative in the report as to why this is what we've chosen. That's just a comment on the report. In terms of sort of questions, there wasn't really anything in here if I think, at all on transport. Obviously in Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, I think he loves the tram, right? He has really been ringing the bell for transport and devolution up there. I think, you know, transport's been a big thing. Down here, obviously, we have the C2C line that goes along the south, and I don't think we have great transport links with the three other authorities we're looking at. I was just wondering, did we do much sort of investigation into that side of things?
Back on that one, Chair. I'll start. I'm sure the officers might have a very, very different. So I've been asked so many times about why Harlow. We can't get to Harlow. Okay. If I said to you tomorrow morning, I'm going to meet you in Shotgate, how would you get yourself there? You wouldn't. But if we join with Basildon, you've got to get yourself to Shotgate. You can't get to Billericay without going into London. So I think that we mustn't get wrapped up in, we haven't suddenly all got to start going over to Harlow or Brentwood. You know, we haven't gotten to do all of those. We'd be joined as a council, you know, so literally there's lots of areas, don't matter where we go. Devolution is about transport and improving transport links. And one of the first things that the Mayor will need to do is to look at the new councils and look at improving transport links. So I don't think that at this point we should be bogging ourselves down on, well, we can't get to Harlow or we can't get to there, because there's lots of places. I can't get to Canvey Island unless I drive. You know, unless I go from south, I've got to get on a train, get on a bus, get on another bus. So again, it's the transport links. It's not the thing for us to get like tied down into. It's something for the Mayor when they come into, and we'll be setting the Mayor some work to do as soon as they come in, that actually transport is one of the main things that they need to be looking at for these new councils. So I just don't want people to think we can't join with them because of the transport links, because I can't get to lots of places. Billericay would be a nightmare. Into London, back out. Wickford even worse, because you can't get back out and then back in again without another change. You've got 2 changes on the way back. So I don't think that transport is a reason for us to get in the weeds of why not. I just think that it's something for devolution and something to put a peg in.
Very fair comment about the narrative. And I held back slightly from putting a narrative in there because I didn't want it to appear as though we were giving a press notice, as it were. But that's a very fair comment. We will, with the chair's permission, more than happy. Well, we are developing a narrative. It's the opening of a business case, and we will share that with you. And comments are very much welcome. As the leader said, the transport is. There's a question about how you experience it, and when you look at travel to work and the lived experience of those that live in those different areas, it's absolutely quite fascinating, the analysis. So, for example, if you look, people think, oh, there's a river, there's a commonality there, there's a C2C, but actually very few people within Thurrock go down towards Southend. Most journeys are within Thurrock and then into London. Southend is most journeys are within Southend, Rochford and Castle Point. So when you start looking at those experiences, it starts to overlay the model that we are proposing. Picking up on your point though about, and as the leader said, about the Mayor and transport, what we've also tried to do here is balance that big major transport infrastructure as well. So we have 2 free ports in Greater Essex and we have 2 airports. So again, it's about evenly distributing those big economic assets as well amongst 4 local authorities.
Thank you for that. I appreciate. I wasn't suggesting that we make transport the be all and end all. It's just something that, you know, when you talk about a mayor coming in and having work to do, improve transport, I just think we'd be starting from a better base if we were looking at the 3 council model, for example. Perhaps a lot of other councils will know this. They might have other colleagues in these other councils. I was curious, because I don't know this off the top of my head. What is the politics of the Lower Thames Crossing in the 3 councils that we're looking to join with? Because we've always been really vocal, and all 49 councillors have always been very, clear. We don't like it. We don't want it. Is that the case with the other three councils we're looking at, Epping and the like?
Sorry, everybody wants it. Essex is a massive fan. I mean, they'd run it tomorrow morning if they could.
Is that the same for Basildon and the like, and all, that they all want it? Crazy, aren't they? All right, okay.
Alex, we agree on something.
So, have you got any further questions before I move on? Has that answered your question?
I did, but it's gone out of my head.
Okay,
So
we'll
you
come back,
come back to me.
Everybody's got more than one bite of the cherry. I've got Councillor Copshall next, and then Councillor Cecil.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for indulging group leaders and inviting group leaders to attend the committee tonight. I think it's really important that we're actually really good show to say that we are having a voice and say in this. I'll pick up my first chain of thought from what Councillor Anderson has said. I know your response to transport and with a view it is. I would just say I'm mindful more so of getting around and a matter of fact of where we talk about these brand new strategic transport systems and what the Mayor can do. I think we have to be a matter of fact that we are Britain. Britain does not build infrastructure very well. It has taken God knows how many years for the Lower Thames crossing just to even get to a point, to take that point. The Cambridgeshire Metro has taken over 2 decades nearly in discussions to get anywhere. Like, we are building an authority that probably won't be able to see a strategic transport connection by the time that we may even get into the next LGR process. And I think it's all pie in the sky and all a conversation point, but when we look at connectivity along the south of the river, the connectivity is there. Canvey Island, you can be in Canvey Island in 35 minutes.
In a car.
No, you can't. You can get off at Benfleet and get on the 27 bus. You get off at Pitsea. It's the same. You get the practicalities. You get to Pitsea and you can get a bus connection to Billericay. There is the natural connectivity in the south of the county that already exists, and it's something that when we look at, I think it was something that Alex said, that people of Malden and the people of Uttlesford, that doesn't make any sense. It's just, I kind of see the same point though if we look at our own model, because with the from people of Thurrock to Harlow, our connectivity and our identity, which was the big point of something that came out of the working group a couple of months ago, one of the early meetings, was where is the natural identity? And the natural identity, other than being we're commuting to London. And I don't see how that is a binding conversation to say that we are building a council that is close to their communities. And I think that's just something I'm very mindful of. And it may be the councillors everywhere will be, I'm very passionate about that idea, because fundamentally there has got to be something that binds it. And that is just something I see in our model as a Thurrock council, obviously a matter of fact of being endorsed by all councillors to make it our model. But I think there's a couple more points, particularly on where we're looking and where we look at our road networks. Just because we can get anywhere by car doesn't mean that it changes anything. But we are building around a motorway. That's what we're doing, and I'm very fearful of. And I'll throw it into the mix. But and I'll be called scaremongering, I'm sure. But a 33rd borough conversation looks blatantly obvious in 30 years' time, 40 years' time. When London goes into a conversation piece. And I know I can see the Labour members shaking their heads to it, but it's something to be mindful of, to have a wider conversation about. We are naturally building an authority around that. But that's assuming that we actually get the LGR process at all. If we get to a process down the line and the Minister thinks this is all too difficult, we have 3 top tiers now providing 3 different models, we're not building around a singular argument, the Minister may just look and go, we'll shelve LGR, we'll stick to devolution. And I think that's something we need to be increasingly aware of in the process of going down this line, if we are going to get to that point. But I think there is as I say, the model in what we see in the working group, I'd like to see the working group perhaps informed a bit more into the model. At times I would say the working group has felt a bit briefy, and it's like, this is what we've presented, and where I know I wasn't myself at the meeting, I sent a substitute, but I know other councillors have felt it, that at that conversation going, here's the information and the data, that data has already been prepared for the working group. It hasn't been the working group feed into that. And I think that's something as we step up, perhaps going into the next few weeks, the meetings are going to become far more regular. I think that's a conversation piece of try to see if we can get more of the discussion piece than this is the work that's been done and what's been presented. I think that may just it's not as criticism, but I think it's just a way to make sure we actually get to that narrative of what we want to do going on. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, thank you for indulging me.
Not at all, and obviously, you, as I said a moment ago, any other questions come back, you don't just get to speak once. I don't know whether anybody wants to respond to that, but I think that this issue of transport, I think for me is particularly of interest, particularly having been former portfolio holder with responsibility for that. I mean, we talk about, the first thing I'd say is, we've said all along, devolution and LGR, they're linked, but they don't go hand in hand. We shouldn't be banking on our travel plan being based on devolution. It might not happen for all we know. But if it does, the mayor is going to have strategic responsibility. He's not going to sit down and worry about how you get from Wickford to Tilbury. That's going to rest with the local authority still. He or she, the mayor, is going to be looking at strategic travel across the whole of the counties. I can't buy this argument that don't worry about travel links, public transport links. The mayor's going to sort that out. Incidentally, my mother-in-law lives in Wickford and she gets to Thurrock quite ably on public transport. She can't get to Harlow, but she can get from Wickford to Thurrock quite easily. So I really do. I agree with Councillor Anderson. I agree with Councillor Cockshaw. This proposed local authority, in terms of particularly public transport links, they're just not there. The mayor isn't going to come in and drill down into that level of detail. And it's when you look at the journeys that people make, I mean, you put buses in, you put rail links in where people want to go. I just can't see how you can. How do you build a transport plan? We spent a lot of time producing our own transport plan. How do you build a transport plan for that kind of local authority? It's so it just I can't. I don't think we can just push transport links to the background. All governments of all colours are saying we need to look at more sustainable transport. We need to get areas better connected aside from rail links. The bones of that aren't even there, and a mayor's not going to put them in. So it seems to me we are creating a local authority of very disparate communities that are going to be poorly linked. And we're hearing leaders saying, don't worry about it now, but Alex, a moment ago, you were citing connectivity as being a really important issue for another local authority. So where are we? Is it important or is it not?
Sorry, my argument is connectivity and the experience of people now is what partly binds them together, and it creates something that the new authority will have to deal with. I'm not suggesting that it is a sense of a neighbourhood or that the combined authority therefore can start building new roads or new bus lines. I don't think anyone here is suggesting that. My suggestion is that the lived experience of people on the whole in Thurrock, Brentwood, Epping and Harlow is driven by very local transport, very local existence. People travel in a very local area, as we do here in Thurrock, as they do elsewhere, or it's about travelling into London. So therefore there's that commonality there. That's what I'm talking about, that it's the experience of people that live in those areas, and that's where there is a common thread. And therefore, as the authority that sits over that, it will understand that its residents face similar issues, or it will want to address whatever, whether it's about engaging with the mayor if there are problems with train lines. It's not suggesting that this authority gives it a new strategic oversight to do new transport. It was more that the lived experience of transport users and that geography is similar. So if you overlay travel to work patterns, it aligns with this 4 configuration, for example.
What do you base that on? Because we haven't seen that in this report. Where is that information? Where is that information?
So Essex County Council did a study a couple of years ago about they looked at travel within Greater Essex, and they looked at travel outside, people going outside of Greater Essex as well. And it's a published document, and I'm more than happy to circulate those maps to the committee, so you can see that. So the connectivity between Chelmsford, Colchester, Braintree, where people travel in the smaller satellite areas.
So people travelling, obviously, from it shouldn't come as any surprise that people living in these areas adjoining London are travelling into London because the reason they exist from the 1940s up, that's why they were built.
Yeah.
It was so Londoners could move out of London, then commute back in. So it's not like a revelation that that's the case. But people are travelling into central London for work, and then they're coming home again. That doesn't bind an area. That doesn't surely provide enough of a link to say this council is going to be a community because everybody travels into London. It seems to be we're pegging too much on this idea that part of the county is home to a lot of people who commute into London. Well, of course they do. That's really what a lot of the communities in South Essex and around London do anyway.
Sorry, Chair. I said it was a measure. I didn't say it was the only one because I wouldn't suggest that there is, even within Thurrock, I wouldn't suggest that commuting to London is a driver that holds people in Ockenden together in the same way it would with Tilbury. I think the story of Essex. You're absolutely right. I mean, there is people moved out. It's my own family's journey from London to Essex, and I'm sure that's true of many others. But Essex is actually made up of small communities, towns, and villages. And that's where identity rests. It's not necessarily with the administrative boundary. I'm simply saying that an authority configured around these four, there is a strategic join-up because there is a commonality around the people that live there, their experience of using transport and their journeys to work follow that pattern. That's all. I'm not suggesting it binds us as individuals within those communities, but it does give you a commonality of what the issues are if you're working in a local authority. That's all I'm saying. But it is one of many, many different indices that make up a sense of community or the issues that a new council would have to deal with.
Okay. I just don't see, it seems like we're almost thinking up things that give us commonality with those areas, which I think you could use that argument for so many other parts of Thurrock. I just don't see how that is enough to sort of create some commonality between those areas in the model. But I'm conscious other members have indicated to speak. Councillor Cecil?
Yes, experiences into this pot. In UA1, in the 4 unitary model, we've got 81,319 over 65s. Now, my experience of the last 68 years of living in Thurrock and 15 years around the rest of the UK and in the Middle East and Far East is pushing me strongly towards this 4 unitary model, and I'll tell you why. The historical link from Thurrock is the A128. Can you remember the 128? The 128 goes through Brentwood, Epping and Harlow. And if you wanted to go to the A1, the A5, the A6, you went through Brentwood, Epping and Harlow. And you drove through the town centres before the M25. Stop for a cup of tea or whatever. And there are, what did I say, 81,319 souls who live in Thurrock, Brentwood, Harlow and Epping. Now I'll give you some more history lessons. The A13 was the last road to be dualled. And how many of you can remember driving to Dagenham or Barking when that was like, and that was horror, wasn't it? We used to use the train and we used the Green Line coaches. You only drove to central London on a Sunday because you just couldn't get there. The North Circular, the South Circular. So you're blessed now by the M25 and the tunnels and the bridges over the Thames. But those 81,319 remember the A128. So there is a strong, strong link. The connection along the A13 to the east has never been developed past Sadler's Farm. And how many of you drive through Benfleet and onwards and Hadley to Southend? I can tell you what we used to do. We went on day trips to the Chalkwell and Westcliff.
Sorry, Councillor Sess, I don't like interrupting, but obviously there's quite a few other members who want to speak.
All right.
Reminiscing,
All right, so before Basildon was built...
Can we get to a point that maybe officers can address?
Well, there are historical links, and those links are well embedded in the 81,000 people who are... thanks, Alex. Before Basildon, we all, the principal towns in Thurrock were, of course, Grays and Tilbury. Tilbury had the ferry, even the car ferry. What I'm saying is we must take this opportunity to go back towards the situation of rebuilding strong links with Brentwood, Epping and Hull. Sorry to have spoilt your meeting, Mr.
No, you haven't spoiled him. Also, you've come and you've read from a statement. The idea is we listen to what's said and we ask questions on what we hear, not come with a written statement.
Yeah, I've got one question which goes...
We're going to move on because, as I
right.
said, there's some other people who have indicated to speak, and I think they probably come without pre-scripted statements. So, Councillor Fletcher and then Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, got to start with transport. Alex, just to sort of bring you up to speed, the trams didn't start with Andy Burnham. I lived for 20 years in Manchester, and the trams were an absolute boon that predated Andy. Key point being that a large authority built around Manchester city centre, the trams or something like them, was the obvious way to sort your transport out. Interestingly, we talk about our inability as a country to build infrastructure. In the 10 years since I've left Manchester, the tram network has doubled. So it can be done if you've got a central authority strong enough and ready enough to make it happen, which is where Andy, I guess, has come in. We haven't got the same kind of structure here. We aren't all based around one central city, so clearly what works for Manchester wouldn't work for us. The idea, though, that we don't have, and I'm thinking about the four here, the idea that our proposed unit or authority doesn't have, doesn't even have the start of a transport infrastructure. Well, it's got a spine. It's called the M25. I hadn't even thought about the A128. So it's actually got a pretty strong start point compared to, we've got the A13 that would take us down the other route. So I'm not saying it's the only game in town, but it's not like we haven't got the start point for connectivity. But for me, more to the point is, and leaving aside the fact that it's for the mayor to decide the transport strategy, but even within our UAs, yes, we would be looking at what works within the unitary authority. Well, we wouldn't be looking at transport in isolation anyway. We'd be looking at our strategies in terms of the development of business, in terms of health, in terms of housing, in terms of infrastructure, and that would feed in to our connectivity plans. I guess what makes this so complicated is we can't look at any of those in isolation. It's actually quite a happy situation to start from, that we've got a spine sitting there, which at least gives us a start point from which to build. So I don't think the connectivity issue counts against the four, or counts against the proposed unitary authority that the leaders come up with. Identity as well. I've got to say, let's not overplay the identity of Thurrock, the strong identity of Thurrock. The number of times over the 2 years I've been in council, this time and the 4 years before, that I've heard people talk about the West and the East. We don't feel like one borough. We don't even vote for MPs like one borough. The identity, the strong local identity of Thurrock, I think exists far more in this council building than it does across the borough. So I think there is grounds for being a bit more creative, and there may well be people who decide they don't particularly want to be lumped in with Harlow, Brentwood, Epping. There's also quite a few who don't particularly like to be lumped in with Curringham.
Thanks, folks.
Anyone want to respond to that?
And I'll turn myself off.
No, I don't think there was.
No, it was a comment. Chair,
Okay.
you did ask for comments as well as questions. That qualifies as a comment. Maybe I should have said so before.
That's fine. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader and Alex, for your report. I just wanted to touch on transport links. We've heard that the transport links in the south is quite poor with what we're proposing with the 4. We've got quite a lot of bus routes here in Thurrock. As an authority, at any time we could, please disagree as this is a question, we could speak to Ensign and ask them to change the bus route and say, well, actually, we've got many residents who want to go to Brentwood Community Hospital, for example. Is that possible?
I think in a world where we have new authorities, whatever the configuration may well be, my honest advice is that any new authority will want to work with whichever bus supply providers there are to make sure that the transport works for their community. So I think in a post-local government reorganisation world, I imagine any authority would want to be having those conversations. Yes.
Thank you. And moving on to, we currently got a resident survey on at the moment. How would that feed into the bid?
So it's about understanding. So we have a number of different sources. We have a current resident survey asking some questions. We've had an earlier all-resident survey to understand how it feels in the borough. There was a Greater Essex-wide surveying all the communities across Greater Essex, and all of that they're still running. There is some once they've been completed, there'll be analysis that will be provided, and it will help play into as we develop a narrative. If there are things that are highlighted in any of those surveys that are challenging because of this geography, then we might need to think again, and we might need to adjust it. But it all plays into the deliberations up until we have a clear proposal that we think we can take to Cabinet towards September.
Yeah, sure.
We hear a lot of misinformation around local government reorganisation, what we are putting forward. How are we going to manage that going forward? Because it's important that our residents get the truth.
All we can do is just carry on going out there, speaking to the residents, taking the data. You know, we talked a lot about transport tonight, but we've got to the place that we've got to today by having meetings, open meetings like this that anybody can attend, any residents can watch. And let's not forget that everything we're doing is all on the data. You've had all of the meetings before, you know, so making sure that the proposal that we put forward is built on evidence-based. It doesn't just dig into one area. You know, so I don't know if there is misinformation, you know, lots of things like, oh, you're just going to join us to London. You know, that's the biggest thing, right? And I spend a lot of time trying to get rid of that myth and telling people that the last time any borough was absorbed into London was in 1965 when we took over Havering. Okay, that was the year I was born, 60 years ago. And people have suddenly come up with the idea of, oh my God, they might absorb us into London. This local government reform is on the Essex footprint. We are not becoming London, and London don't want us. Okay, we are not. So this, or we might become London, and George is like, oh, we don't know what's coming down the line. 60 years ago, the last time. It's madness that any of this is going to absorb, you know, us into London. It's not happening. It's really not happening. This local government reform is Essex. The footprint is Essex. It is staying Essex. That's the sort of stuff that I waste time that I could be talking about, the data, the metrics and all of the other stuff, when you just have to close down, oh, but we might become London. We are not becoming London. I quite like living near London. I go out, I meet my sons there, you know, people commute there. We take the benefits of London. We like our house prices being in line with London. We like to be able to commute into London so we can earn their salaries, you know, and then all of a sudden it becomes dirty when, oh, we might be talking about, you know, going towards London and following the M25. I just think that really, you know, let's concentrate on the metrics. Let's not make sure that when we do put together something and we submit it, it has to go in on the data. Let's listen to the residents. Not one person last night talked to me about, you know, oh, we might go into London, you know, like some of the residents that come onto the call last night, you know, but then you'll get the empty vessels across social media, you know, and it's a waste because it's not about London. That's the big stuff that worries me.
Councillor Howden.
Thanks, Chair. Alex, you said at the start in your presentation that the 3 or the 5 unitary model creates too many divisions in the social care authorities. Could you just explain what you meant, please?
Yes, certainly. So obviously, social care functions are managed by the upper tier authorities, so that's Thurrock, Southend, and then the entirety of Essex County Council. There are inherent problems when you try to merge 2 social care functions together. It has happened, you know, it does happen in other local government reorganisation. There's only been one instance where they have merged 3 together, and it's incredibly complex, and it can inject quite a lot of risk into services that you're managing for the most vulnerable. So my point was, with the model running along the south, you're essentially having to amalgamate 3 social care services into one new council, where if you compare it to the model we have with 4, you're essentially building on the success and, you know, the existence of 2 good, well-performing unitary authorities in terms of those services in those 2 areas, and then you're disaggregating the existing county ones elsewhere. So the point I was trying to make is it's about managing that level of risk. That's all.
Thanks, that's helpful. I've already said I think there's a great deal of merit in the footprint that you've come up with because of the health inequalities. But on the basis of what you just said about bisecting social care authorities, wouldn't you concede that the 4 unitary model makes an awful mess of the foundation trust footprint? So what we do for hospitals, etc. Because at the moment, by far the most dangerous element of social care is joint reablement as people come out of hospitals and return to the community, and our 4 unitary model totally rips across the footprint that we use for foundation trust planning.
Thank you, Councillor. I think foundation trust notwithstanding, I think we're at a precipice of lots of change within the NHS. We know that there's going to be changes at the ICB level, and we know from recent correspondence from the Minister, which was published and is public, that regardless of footprints, wherever we get to on these maps, there is an expectation from government and from the Department for Health and Social Care, in the way I read those letters, that they would expect councils to work across those boundaries, particularly when delivering health, adult social care and children's social care. It's not abundantly clear now what that looks like, but I would expect as the changes within ICBs and the NHS continue to evolve, it would take into account the fact that these new unitary authorities are expected to work more closely together to think about exactly the points you raise on where people travel to hospital and how they leave their homes. I think that is a question for the implementation of the new model, and I don't necessarily think that the NHS structures as they are now should hold us back, given how much change is coming down the line.
But I think that's a reasonable comment. I don't think that should hold us back, but yeah, the statement that Alex made was you're concerned about the social care disaggregation, which is a reasonable thing to worry about. But the reality is, as much as we can encourage the unitaries to work together, we've got a county where there are three big players in hospital care, Mid and South, SNE and Wessex. That they aren't going to change their footprint. They made it clear they're not changing their footprint. So we have still got a population here in Thurrock that are in a foundation trust system where they rely on what we have in Southend Hospital, rely on what we have in Broomfield Hospital, and yet we're going to have a social care system that takes us all the way up to Princess Alexandra in Harlow. So from that point of view, if we're worried about the social care side, you have to worry about the other health side, and this model does create an awful mess out of that system.
But there is no coterminosity. It's very. If you can draw me a map that answers that question, I mean that's part of the problem, isn't it? The NHS configuration or the CCGs, I shouldn't say that, but it just doesn't work really for any local government footprint. That relationship between the NHS and discharge of patients into the social care system is indeed something that we need to manage and is a risk whatever configuration that we move to. And actually I think it's an important part, if I may, around communications. Once the decision has been made, what we need to do in the run up to 2028 is communicate with our most vulnerable to ensure that they understand that we're doing how the new system will work, how the new council will work, and how to get the support that they need. Because we've got to make sure that there is a safe service and people know how to access it and continue to get the care that they need. So there is a big challenge there around how we reassure and manage that risk. I think the integration of 3 council systems in social care feels... It's been done once before, it was very problematic, and it took a very long time, and it's a judgment call that we've discussed with the leader and others about whether that is an acceptable one. So in all of in any implementation of a new structure, you're balancing that management of risk really. And I think we drew a line there and just said the integration of 3 social care functions along the south, it feels inherently risky and not necessary, which is why we put it there. But you're right to raise the NHS link, and it is something that we'll need to really drill into when we move into implementation, without a doubt.
Did you want to come back on that? Oh, that answer, okay. Next, I have Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. In taking on board everybody's constructive comments around the table, and to be honest, with the calibre of the councillors we've got around the table, I would expect no less. But just to bounce back how this seemed to emerge around our side of the working group, the criteria that we were given was very specific in relation to the white paper itself. Those were the guidelines, just 2 items on our brief and nothing else. And the reason that this has come about is what are we going to rule out as opposed as to what could be ruled in. And I have to take on board comments that Councillor Maurice Cook made at the last full council meeting, where she indicated the level of debt that we're holding is public knowledge throughout all of the country, everywhere knows. But on top of the criteria laid down here, we also had to give consideration to the amount of debt that Essex as a whole is holding, which is touching around, I believe, Leader, around 4 billion at this current moment in time now, wherever we are. And you have to remember, Chair, that we are sitting already with 3 authorities in Essex already, and they're not exactly bursting off the page with success. And the way we're coming forward on this one, and I accept it's a new approach, we're not going to get 1 extra bus route running in this county at all whatsoever, by not addressing the burden that we're facing jointly with our colleagues around Essex as well. And we weren't absolute, and I said at the beginning, Councillor Howden, that I would have to be really convinced that the 3 options should have to be ruled out. But if you consider Thurrock's position along the estuary with our other neighbouring councils, I don't think I think the other 2 probably would have been all right, given the sustainability that's indicated on the page, future sustainability. I think the other 2 would have been all right. I don't think the one along the estuary, which we would have been part of, would have lasted that long in the 3, let alone the 5. And so the 4 might be a compromise, but it's within the criteria that the government laid down, and it also fits with the way we were expecting as a bid in relation to sustainability going forward. That jumps off the page in this document, and of course the debt, and of course the population density going forward. Now, I've yet to hear a strong alter proposal around the table that actually turns around and says, no, the 4 should be kicked into the long grass because of this, this and this. And that's the way that we feel, I believe, as a group, we should be taking this forward and the submission to the government. Now, we're going to be dealing a lot in this committee with the minutiae going forward of when local government reform carries on. And that's before we even start start dealing with the devolution powers going to the mayor. But at this point in time, the proposal that we've got, we believe, is the best game in town. And we consider that based on the data that we believe is open, upfront, honest and transparent. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cockshaw and then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions really now this time, particularly for the council tax base. I think that's the conversation piece, and it's probably something that the committee may want to take up on, or maybe something we could take into the working group. Particularly around, we've got a Band D equivalent that is making an assumption, but that obviously we know in Thurrock our average is Band C, Band B. It's not. We're having to. We're going to rely on perhaps over higher council tax bands in other areas to get us to that Band D equivalent. I think just something to be mindful of is probably I'd like to understand of what is the makeup of that Band D, because is it a Band D equivalent in terms of this is what we get, or is it because we're seeing more Band E's, F and G's in some areas and we're relying on those houses more than actually lower banded properties. And then also leading on to that on the conversation of if we, as a new authority, has the power, I don't want to. It goes back to a point I raised in January about I don't think this is an opportunity for pality. We're surely going to have a conversation about rebasing the whole authority. Like we can't just assume that we are going to have a pality between all things and we raise everything, because we don't need to know that figures. And I think that's a point for the working group or corporate to raise, to say actually we don't. If it's a conversation, we need to explore the rebasing bigger. And I know officers have said could be an option before, but I'm just very mindful of the timelines we have now getting to that point, and we're getting quite near to the mark. And then just as a second point, just curiosity on resident engagement so far with the call last night. What was the attendee number, really? I think just as a curiosity to see how many people attended. And I'm mindful, obviously, I think councillors have got their own separate briefing next week. So it was just a bit of just making sure that hopefully councillors do attend and get a chance. I think I was a bit surprised. I know councillors' briefing was post-resident engagement, but I appreciate the timelines, but I think there's just as a point to really note, but just curiosity on those 2 points.
It's a very, very fair and good question about council tax rebasing. I mean, it is. I mean, when we looked at it, we thought it was marginal in terms of what could happen, but it's a very fair question, and we will put in writing in terms of the assumptions. In terms of Sorry, I'm pausing because I'm just pondering. I don't know whether the government would want to take a view on council tax more broadly and rebase. What am I trying to say? Council tax. The council tax system is so phenomenally out of date in the way that business rates isn't. You know, we update that every few years. It's a live system. I don't know whether the government will be minded to do anything more broadly on that.
No, I'm not talking about rebanding properties or a whole wider thing. It's just a rebate. It's a part of the account. From conversations with my colleagues who are perhaps more experienced in council tax than I am, there is an opportunity with the new authority boundaries should be to rebase, to just evaluate the Band D levelling of what we charge or whatever they charge based on the mix up of what the whole. That's why it leads on to the point of how many are actually in band. Are we relying on band Fs or band Bs? That's the. I appreciate council. No government in their right mind will ever touch council tax for the political reasons.
Sorry, I apologise. I was answering a different question. So we essentially equalisation in terms of what you can do. We did look at that. It's very, very minor in terms of across those three areas in terms of the difference it would make. But more than happy to send you that detail.
Thank you.
Yeah, so last night was our first about engagements as a webinar. So it was something that we pulled together really, really quick for people that maybe didn't want to come out and ahead of like doing the face-to-face. And there was 25 on the call. And what was your other question?
No,
Oh, that was it. Okay, yeah, there was 25 on the call.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
For any future webinar events, do we have a strategy to try and boost that? And we've got about 175,000 people in the borough, haven't we? I mean, I'm glad it was positive, but would have been nice if there was a bit more than that, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that, do you know what, I was really a little bit sceptical about whether it would work but it was a really good feel in the call. And so absolutely, I think it is a bit of a way forward. And one of the things that I contacted our political assistant and said, put it on the agenda. I think it is a way to engage with your residents. You know, it's a new way of engaging with the residents. But we have to remember that, you know, this consultation, it's a community engagement. I mean, we're not doing the consultation. The government will do the consultation. So anybody that says, oh, we're doing consultations, they're not. The government's doing the consultation. We're engaging with our communities to get their views to feed into our modelling that will go in September. So it's just one other way of gathering evidence and people's opinions. So, you know, and our timeline's really, really quick, you know. Here we are, like August, mid-August. This time next month, we've got to have our business plan ready to submit, you know. So we advertised it online, we put it out on website, it went to in all of the newsletters, was shared across social media, you know. But again, if we had 6 months, Alex, I would have done 10 of these. But I haven't got the time to do 10 webinars. So really it's about doing all that we can in the time that we've got. And I think that we're also doing about 20 other engagements over the summer just to get out to our residents, because us 49 are not all of the residents. You know, you're right, we've got 179,000 people. And as I can talk to as many of them as possible, then I'll feel like I've done my job as the leader.
Yeah. So not on that. Thank you for that. But and I suppose it's not really a question of this because it was kind of picked up throughout the conversation after I spoke last. But just on the sort of populations, I'm not suggesting we're getting hung up on it, but I think the 730,000 has been described as, you know, really big and distant. 488,000 isn't massively. That's still a lot bigger than what we've got going at the moment. And as well, when we talk about, you know, really big councils, you mentioned, I think, North Yorkshire, but obviously Kent County Council, I think, has over like 1.5 million. So I mean, there are massive. I appreciate that, but you know, it's similar. County council will be whatever we're called. We're a council. We deliver services, sort of thing. So I don't think that's something that ought to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And of course, in the white paper, I think it says that the government is anticipating, given that they want larger, more sustainable councils, they're anticipating councils of around 500,000, but it's not like they have to be in a set range, etc., etc. And then the only other comment was, and it's a bit risky because my friend George got a rap on the knuckles for it, but I have to say I am a little bit concerned about down the line us ending up, however you want to say it, as part of being overly influenced by London. You mentioned 1965 was the last time that a borough joined London. That's a while ago. It sounds like they're due for a new one.
Alex, anything there you want to respond to? Is there anything, Councillor Anderson, you want them to specifically respond to?
I think
Okay, thanks. I mean, because you've raised it on the issue of the size. Okay, yeah, you're right. The estuary model, I'll call it that. It would be the largest unitary authority, but we're in an era of new local government anyway. So I think that we shouldn't compare what's in existence now and think that's the norm. I mean, Norfolk County Council, for example, it's proposing one unitary for the whole council, and that's 1 million people. So it's not as if, if Thurrock were to do this, we would probably be breaking the mould and forever and a day be the largest local authority. There are other options coming. I think that the option being put forward by Norfolk County Council, they're saying it's the only viable option. So but that's just an observation. I'm not expecting anyone to comment on the plans being put forward by Norfolk County Council. But equally, we shouldn't get so hung up, I don't think, on this size of population, because there are other options coming forward which are considerably bigger. Moving on, Councillor Howden.
I'm slightly perplexed that the leader of Reform is concerned about West Essex joining London. After all, as Councillor Fletcher just pointed out, Southend does face West Flanders, so I'm not entirely convinced there's a
good chips.
Just a very direct question, Leader. It does still remain the case that 3 unitaries is more financially sustainable.
Yeah, so to come back on that, and if we was only looking at money, absolutely, 3 would be the answer. Absolutely, because it's the one that, if you look at the bottom line, because we're all forgetting that we are over £1 billion in debt, so there is going to need to be some government support for any of the models to be working, and we need to get our lines down to about 11% to be in SIPFA guidelines, and the unitary authority of 729 still only gets us to 16%. So it's not the answer. It doesn't get rid of the debt. What it does, and this is if there was all of the 3 that are on the table, 3 is my least favourite. Okay, it takes us further away from our residents. So I've done a quick figure. So you could say that we're not all going to suddenly, have, we're going to have elected members, and there's been a discussion in the working group about what that could look like and how many. So if you think that this is about efficiencies, this is about less councillors, which will be your dream answer, Councillor Holden, you've always said that. So I just did a quick sum today. 729,000 people, but maybe about 80 councillors is probably where they're going to go, yeah? You will each be responsible for 9,000 residents. At the moment, that's about the size of Grays Thurrock ward, okay? So that's a different kind of councillor, doing a different kind of job, taking you further away. You will be responsible, it will be harder. Smaller communities could easily get lost, and their voices and their problems in a much bigger council. So I think that there could almost be a whole meeting talking about what would 3 mean, the 4 mean, the 5 mean. But for me, 3 is the one that really, really does worry me. It takes us so far away from our residents. It's how are we've then got to redesign all of our systems, all of our waste, all of our IT, all of our officers. Small world issues will get lost. what matters to our residents now. So we lose our sense of place. That is the biggest thing for me. It's about residents want to feel close to their councillors. That's a fact. If it was feeling close to our residents, we'll all go for the 5, okay? Because smaller keeps you closer to your residents. But I think that we lose our sense of place with that 729,000. You imagine one councillor, 9,000 residents. You know, but we don't know. It could be 60, it could be 70, it could be 100. We don't know. So I just sort of went somewhere in the middle to do that. So I just think this is about communities. It's not about, you know, the scale of size. I think that 729 being the largest council, it doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't shout out to me that that's what our residents want us to see. They don't want to, I don't think the residents want to see us as the biggest council. I really don't. And any of the data points, which you've all had over time and time again, to look at it, you know, the data doesn't lend us to that is the best answer either.
Yeah, I'll just say respectfully, Leader, I just don't quite agree. I just don't think my constituents in Stamford are going to care whether or not they're in a council with Rochford or a council with Harlow. Either way, they're going to consider it suboptimal. So, if you're going to, if people are not going to get that sense of ultra localism, which you will never have in a unitary authority, you simply can't have it because it's too big by its very definition. Surely, we may as well punt for the version that is the most financially sustainable.
But my residents know where to get me, you know, my residents know where to find me, and there's 3 of us that work on the ward. In some areas there's 4, in some areas there's 2. You know, it's about economy of scale. I just worry that we lose the sense of place. The bigger we get, I'm not making it up myself, you know, if you look into reports on this, I've read many reports on this, the bigger you get, the further you get away from your council. Okay,
yeah, but no,
I think it will bring back things like area assemblies and things like that. There is ways of like engaging with your residents.
I think you do make a credible point. I just think in the climate that we're in, yeah. I think having a council that's the most financially sustainable is less important than how close politicians feel to communities.
It's about sense of how you do run your services too. I think that services will be better under 500,000 than they will under 729,000, and they'll be more sustainable than under 350. It's what the government said 500,000. I've just gone along and done the work on what 4 looks like meeting the 500,000. Just done what the criteria give us, really, Councillor Holden.
But I think services will be more sustainable if there's more money in the bank account, and the evidence that you put in front of us is there's more money in the bank account with 3 unitaries. Well, no, that's what it is. That's literally what you put in front of us. That there is greater debt financial sustainability if there are fewer unitaries. You know, services will be better if there is more financial firepower available. This information shows us there's more financial firepower available if it's 3 unitaries.
So at the end of the day, this is going to go in. We're going to have 3 go in, 4 go in, 5 go in. There's going to be a consultation. We could stay here for weeks arguing about whether it's 3, 4 or 5. The government is going to come out to consultation. We are not making this decision. I said it at the beginning of the evening. The government will come out and consult, and the government will make this decision. I'm just making sure. I didn't think that 3 gave enough weight in, or 5 gave enough weight in, and I was determined to make sure that we put all of the options in front of the government for them to be able to make an informed decision. This isn't our decision, you know, it's not something that we're going to vote on in the chamber and make it happen here. This is going to be a government decision. So I'm just making sure that there is a viable 4 on the table using the evidence and the criteria that was put in front of us.
You're right, we could be all night, but our job is, I suppose, to be satisfied that Thurrock Council is putting forward the best option, because if you don't, the risk is if we put something forward which doesn't hold a lot of water. Let's be honest, there's lots of reasons for this to be shot down, particularly, Councillor Howden said at the start of the meeting, unless you've got buy-in, if you've got a lot of local authorities all undermining this, the potential is this could very quickly be brushed off the Minister's desk. Our options off the table, then we're at the mercy of the more sensible options. So I don't think it's, there wouldn't be any point to this meeting if we just accepted the position, well, it's a government decision, so let them get on with it. We wouldn't be doing our job. I mean, Councillor Howden raises a valid point. We've got to really test where the council's coming from, how the basis for its decision, because if we don't put forward something which seems viable or is a bit odd to people looking at it, our options off the table and the Minister's looking at other options. So I think it's right to push that point. I mean, economic viability has got to be the number one consideration. And I think there are you're right, there's some really good facts and figures in here which support the option that the council is putting forward. But my concern is if we come up with an option that can be undermined quite readily, we are then really you've got other local authorities in the county bringing forward options which might look more viable. They could effectively be deciding our fate for us because our option isn't the one which ticks all the boxes.
And I suppose I will counter that in that if we do so this is 2 years' time, so the government will look at this, and we've had an assurance from government that as long as we meet our best value duty in setting a budget, selling our assets that we need to do to be able to do that there will be financial support, and the amount of financial support added into the bottom line here makes our case viable. It brings us down to that SIPFA guideline. So for me, that makes our case fully viable. So I am strong on, I think that 4 needs to be on the table. It's a sensible option with the government support that they've already said that they would do. It takes us into the area that makes this a fully sustainable council that is of the right size, serving our residents, and that's all I've got to say on it. I just feel really strongly that with the right level of support, this is absolutely financially viable, and it does keep us as a centre place.
Councillor Panjala.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. And thank you, Leader, for your open and transparent and giving opportunity for everyone. Really appreciate that one. And also officers for providing the report and comparison. All the data is really appreciate. So it will give like a more enhanced way we can give like a feedback about our recommendation. If we see Thurrock, we recommending like 4 authorities. And in that one, like Thurrock, Brentwood, Epping Forest and Harlow, whereas comparing to other 2 models like a 3 and 5, we can see that Basildon is missing in our 4 recommendation. And Basildon, if you see the demographically sharing major border, Thurrock sharing the major border. And also if you see the financial sustainability is a 2nd rank as per the 14 districts. Basildon like a 38,322 GVA per capita, 2nd rank. So now Thurrock is already in depth. So if we include Basildon, maybe it will good for financial point of view and also demographically sharing major border. So what do you think? This is like a fixed one for sharing these 4 boroughs. Is there any changes? We are happy to go with the 4 model. So missing Basildon, just I'm thinking that one to share my opinion here. Thank you.
So indeed, Basildon does have a very strong GVA, but it's about understanding where that can be, as it were, best deployed and how is it best to support. So if you look further along the river and you look at the GVA of Rochford, Southend, Castle Point, they're significantly lower. So in order to create a good authority there that has a stronger economic presence for its residents, you are limited as to where you can go because obviously it's land, it's surrounded by water. There aren't very many other places you can go. So our analysis suggested to make that new cluster of authorities viable, Basildon really had to play a part there and lend its GVA to that model. And we, as a almost equally strong authority with GVA, working our way around the M25, that worked for us, but we thought Basildon had a stronger role to play to support those authorities. So that was the rationale behind that.
Thank you, officer, for the clarification. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Purely my understanding, what we discussed tonight, 4 is in effect, I'm not going to say a compromise, I don't think it's good, but we're trying to do a balancing act. And if it were purely about financial sustainability, I think everybody in the room would go, 3, that's it, job done. My understanding is we're trying to balance the financial stability, enough financial stability with enough of a chance to actually build something that people can relate to. And for me, that's my understanding of why 4, why you've arrived at that decision. I do think there have been some really good points made tonight that I would hope you guys will take away and think, okay, we just had the discussion around Basel and you've got a good reason why Basel, but let's take account of what's been said tonight. It's not the finished product just yet. And I think what we as a committee would want to see, given that you've given us your time, you've come along and you've talked to us about this, with great transparency. I think the one thing we'd be looking for, speaking for myself, the one thing I'd be looking for is, so having had this discussion and having put forward a few challenges, can we ask you, can we rely on you to take those away and actually give them some constructive, positive thought, and come back to us with what, if anything, you think you would change, having heard from us, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Councillor. Incredibly helpful comment, and I would like to give a guarantee to you and to all members of this committee that we are here so that your views, comments and questions can be inputted directly to the work we are doing to develop our proposal. That, the leader has already said, that's a very tight timeline. We have created this timeline and put this extra meeting in to allow this conversation to happen while we are still literally holding the pen on sections of this this proposal. The comments around the use of data, the position of particular councils, transport, these are all in my notebook because I will go tomorrow to a meeting with the colleagues who are writing the proposal, and I will ask them to think about how we are pulling this out in different sections. The other opportunity that gives us is to come back to you at the beginning of September. There is an overview and scrutiny meeting just at the beginning of September. I hope very much to be able to come to you with sections of that proposal and draw your attention to sections where I know that your input has had a direct input on the words on those pages. I will go away and I will do that work with my teams to demonstrate that to you, and you will hopefully see that in the pages of the proposal.
Sorry, just to sort of further ask, could we also know where you've decided, okay, that's a good point, but we've decided not to go with it? Could you make a point of just letting us know? I think, I'd like to know where our challenges have been, not disregarded, but where you've gone, yeah, okay, see your point, but we're going to go this way.
So
let us know why.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I would say there. I think Alex is quite right. He's just said all of the points need to be addressed. All of the points made by the committee need to be addressed. You will of course understand the position we find ourselves in, that actually while we have to be transparent and truthful about the position, the proposal will be positive for the position. We will want to make a positive case for why a minister or the Secretary of State indeed should make the decision, and therefore some of the narrative around the points may not always fully address the concerns. I think we have to remember that those concerns will be well addressed by our neighbours who are writing different business cases. There are other options on the table for good reason. They stand on their own merits. We will put forward the best merits for the best decision. But yes, we can make that clear to the committee at the beginning of September too.
Thanks. Because I mean, you know, the reason we're saying this, we don't want you racing against those other proposals with a hole in the boat.
Absolutely, and it's almost a distraction to think about the other business cases, because actually it's about making sure that there is an option for the government to choose which is credible. So I really enjoy discussing this, you know, in the discussion, for example, around ICBs, and it's exactly the kind of thing we need to tease out, and we need to address it, because if we ignore it, it's not a credible business case, you know, and that's why this input is so valuable, because it strengthens it to say that we've acknowledged, we understand, you know, there are issues we need to work out, or there are ones that, you know, there are things that we can deal with, but it's that credibility point. So it's crucial, so thank you.
Just come back and say, this work is too important for the leader, for the cabinet, for you, for officers in this council to put forward a busted flush. I won't put my name on a busted flush. I wouldn't expect the leader to put her name on a busted flush either, and we will do everything that we can with you, with the working group, to make sure that that is not the case.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Leader, and rest of the team for the important information you give us. Me personally, I would be going with the 3 unitary one, but then the next question leads on to that is, on the 4, was it ever looked at putting Thurrock into UA4 and putting Basildon into UA1?
I need my map for that. So sorry, if you could kindly just run that past me again. So
yeah, if you put Thurrock into Southend, Castle Point, Rochford, the south, which is the equivalent of what a 3 unitary is, I'm putting Basildon into UA1, because Basildon does link with Brentwood.
it doesn't. Go on, Patrick.
Yep.
Well, I had a different light there for a second, forgive me. And the reason that we didn't do that is one of the red lines that we've talked about when we came to the committee previously, and one of the things that both the leader and Alex have discussed with you this evening. But if you move Thurrock there to the east, what you're doing is you're combining those 2 unitary authorities. The conversation we've had this evening about the complexity of disaggregating 3 upper tier health or children's services frameworks goes unanswered if you move Thurrock towards the east, and it is built into a local authority alongside Southend. And so that decision we have made, that complexity, given the time frame, creates a difficulty, and why we stand against or find difficult the Southern Council in the 3 unitary option is a reason why we discounted that approach.
But you've already got the situation where Basildon Hospital and Southend Hospitals do link themselves together. And you're saying because, but they do it already. And they are, using the words, 2 separate unitary authorities, but they work together.
So the fact that the hospitals and the health system work together is, I completely agree with you. You're quite right. I think the focus we've had in the red line we've discussed is the disaggregation of the local social care services, which of course while we've had a helpful conversation here this evening about how they're linked, particularly with discharges from hospital and delayed transfers of care. We didn't want to build local social care services based on hospital proximity, because that's not necessarily how the delivery of social care works on a footprint.
So this has obviously come up a couple of times in the meeting about how basically creating a local authority that includes 2 unitary authorities with responsibility for social care is complex, but I haven't really heard why. And I know you have looked at one other example, I think, but how I understand why it may present some complexities, but why is it such a fundamental consideration as to have such a bearing on the option? I haven't really heard why it's such an issue.
So it's not that we only looked at one. There has only been one. I mean, that's the level of that. You know, it's been deemed by others that have done local government reorganisation that it's just inherently hard. So if you have two existing services that operate separately from each other, and you're trying to integrate two, whether it's around harmonising terms and conditions, contracts with suppliers, service levels with those contracts, what you expect your elderly care to get, your adults leaving the care system, how you support foster carers, you know, social care across different demographics is very, very hard. It's challenging to do that with two similar authorities with different ways of working. If you then introduce a third, we believe that it introduces a level of risk that exposes vulnerable people in the community to a level of risk because of an administrative exercise that is not palatable. So that's why we did it. Trying to merge three different functions into one is far harder than trying to merge just two. And that's why we just thought it is a step too far in terms of risk management.
Perhaps at another committee we could have a bit more of an explanation around that, because as I said, wouldn't in any way dismiss that. I haven't got the evidence to dismiss it, but it sounds like we're putting a lot of emphasis on that. But as you've only looked at one example because there is only one example. It just doesn't strike. I mean, when you're merging this number of local authorities, there's going to be all manner of things that have to be unpicked, contracts that have been signed over a number of years, which are going to have to be brought to an end. It's not going to be unique just to social care. I understand that people who rely on that are amongst the most vulnerable. I get that, and I wouldn't expect it to be seamless. But at the moment, I can't understand why that is such a consideration as to have the level of bearing that you think it should have on how we shape our local authority. And it would just, rather than saying, no, it happened there, it didn't happen very smoothly, and there were problems. So we've put a lot of emphasis on that in our proposal, or in shutting down that option. I need more justification, more understanding of why it's so fundamental.
Absolutely, I think you make a fair point that there needs to be further justification of that. I think the evidence exists from around the country. We can demonstrate that to you the next time that we meet. The committee will know that we've also built some staff capacity to help us ready ourselves for local government reorganisation. And actually, a member of the team has direct experience of working in that one place where that complexity happened on the ground, and so we can also provide some personal experience about the complexities of that programme. We're very happy to do that to the chair and to the committee.
Thank you. Because looking from the outside in, I would say that having two unitary authorities that have been running their social care function for a long time, you're getting double the amount of expertise into the new local authority. The
difficult challenge to the double amount of expertise in the south is, of course, the very difficult issue that you're taking all of the unitary experience and putting it in one authority in the south, and you don't have any unitary experience further north in the map. I raise that only to demonstrate that these things are a matter of balance. We talk about complexity, we talk about balance. There are degrees in all of this, whether it's about complexity of services or transport links. I think what we are trying to demonstrate is that we've made a judgment about those complexities, and it brings us to a position. But yes, we can further demonstrate why we took that decision.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from anyone? No? Okay.
Just health profile summary clearly shows, doesn't it, that child health, the wider determinants health, the health inequalities, the health protection as listed, are all very, very high for Thurrock. Now this gives us much ammunition to fight with whoever the NHS turns towards us and is their new organisation. We could ask glibly for Orsett Hospital to be resupplied, and it's quite clear that Thurrock has been starved of good health care appropriate to the needs we have.
Would you like to respond to that? Did you have a specific question, Councillor Cecil?
Sorry?
Did you have a specific question, or was it just an observation?
No, that's a comment looking at the health program.
Okay, thank you for that. Officers, I think, and the leader have noted that. Okay, so we move on to the recommendations, and I think our job's a bit difficult because the recommendations really are fairly loose, which is perfectly understandable. But I don't think there's a common theme emerging from the committee in terms of where we should go, where we shouldn't go. It's a difference of opinion, but I think the individual comments have been made, I'm sure noted, and we look forward to receiving more information. I'm going to quickly turn to Councillor Jones. He indicated quite a long time ago he wanted to speak, and as he's a chair of a committee, I'm happy to bring him in.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask a question, and thank you, Alex and the leader. I'm here tonight, realistically, to learn more, because it's such a big issue in Thurrock, and many residents are asking us various questions, and to be quite fair, I don't think I can answer them. You know, it's one of them, such a big thing. And I'm understanding at the moment of the four, leader, you know, of your reasons why the four. But I must admit, I was shocked at where the four lie. We've had South Essex Partnership working before, and I felt that it worked okay before, and that, as mentioned, another unitary council, it gives us greater experience. So I just want to make sure that we get the best for Thurrock. That's my main concern, the best for Thurrock, for the residents of Thurrock, and that, you know, it bears well for Thurrock. So that's my concern. So when I'm sold that is the way forward, then maybe I will feel a little bit more understanding of it. But my other question, really, realistically, is have we spoke to these other authorities, and what is their opinions? You know, all these councils are sitting down there and saying, vying for going for that area, or that area. And, you know, wouldn't it be kind of odd if we sit down there and then it goes to, you get your business case together and it goes to government, and then they sit down and say, actually, we don't think that works. So that's where we think it should go. But then councillors, but they didn't want us because, you know, they've had these meetings. So where are we on this? Do we meet up with Harlow? Do we meet up with Brentwood, and how do they feel about it? And I've got one asked question. Answer that one in first,
Okay,
please.
so first of all, there's a series of meetings where we meet regularly as Essex leaders and chief execs, and then officers meet with officers. So, you know, so Alex will go and meet with other officers, and our finance officer will meet with other finance officers. So there's already a great deal of shared working, shared data, shared relationships. And then on the business cases, we've got pooled data that everybody's using to get all of the information. So there's no surprises. Well, not many surprises anyway. So I wouldn't say there's none, but there's not many. And then I started the beginning of the evening talking to other councils, and you're absolutely right. But I am going to meet Harlow, and I am going to meet Brentwood Council leaders and chief executives, and I'm going to Rochford, and I am speaking to other councillors all the way through August. So it won't be any surprise. I will be speaking to Essex County Council. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. There's no real surprises. You know, we'll talk to each other anyway. You know, so I don't know if Alex wants to add anything to that, but my diary fills up by the day, Councillor Jones, about where I'm going to meet to talk about the 4. And we meet online. There's lots of meetings online where we join and we talk about, you know, where each person is on their modelling. You know, we're not all doing this in a back room and not sharing information. I've seen the 3, I've seen the 5. And that was what made me go, actually, neither of them look after Thurrock. Neither of those 2 models look after Thurrock and our residents and our interests. And it was a really flip when I looked at it and I thought, they're not looking after us. I'm going to make sure I'm looking after us. And that's where I come from. And I will carry on until the end and make sure that this 4 goes in and it does represent us. So please make a meeting with Patrick and Alex and have a look at all of the other data so that you can go to your residents and speak confidently. I started the evening like that. I want you to be able to go there and speak to your residents and say, this is why she's doing the 4.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. So our business case goes to government, and then they have a consultation. How long does that take, and who's the consultation with, as such?
Yeah, because I did cover it.
So the government is required by the statute under which it makes the decision to go to formal consultation. It's statutory, so we expect it to be 12 weeks. We don't know the timeline, but we expect there to be a decision once that consultation closes. We have experience because they've done a recent statutory consultation on devolution options, and so we know that the approach we expect colleagues in the civil service to take. But we certainly know that after the deadline there'll be a short period of consideration, there'll be a consultation, and there'll be no decision until that consultation closes and the responses have been analysed. And so we're looking at a decision on way to go in the spring of 2026.
Consultation with who?
It's a public consultation, so it's published on the government's consultation website. There will be comms and media around that at national level, and all councils in the area, if we're going off the back of the devolution consultation, will be expected to take part in comms activity that allows residents to see there's a consultation and to input into that. If we're taking devolution as an example as well, you would expect to see ads on social media, you would expect to see various bits and pieces come from UK government sites, and we would expect to see that again.
Thank you. I'll ask again, any final comments, questions? No? Okay. I mean, I'm conscious of time, but everybody I think is going to have a different view on this. I think even within groups you're going to have different views. I mean, my own personal opinion is I'm not wedded to 3, I'm not wedded to 4. I'd like to think there's a viable 4, but I don't like this 4. I don't like this option which has come forward. And I suppose it would really help me. You it's a question to the leader. You said that you think a 4 unitary option preserves a sense of place in Thurrock or community. I'm still struggling to understand that. I'm conscious of time, but could you just explain to us again why you think that this particular model, this model of 4 unitary, somehow gives us something more than the other option? You mentioned the size of council seats or councillor to head of population, but that's a very tentative way to measure a sense of place, to say that, you know, it's a barometer. However many people a councillor represents, that's a barometer of whether there's a sense of place or not. Can you just explain why you think this, bearing in mind we've acknowledged that a system of 3 gives more financial stability, how you think your proposal preserves a sense of place or sense of community? For here, but obviously we're creating a new council, so it has to be something that works across that new local authority area. So your rationale for believing that this creates some sense of place and community.
So for all of us, when I go on holiday and people say to me, where do you live? I don't say I live in Thurrock, I say I live in Tilbury. Okay, so that again, people will always have their sense of place about where they live. Okay, so that's one of the factors, and I just think it's a sense of place is about where your services are, and I talked about it earlier about our commonalities about, I know there's been lots of talk about we're going to get lots of building and, you know, we're going to lose loads of our green spaces. That again is a commonality with us. Okay, we share a police force with them. You know, we share connectivity. The way that we live our lives shares, gives us a connectivity. There's lots, but you can do that across any way. I could have gone to Basildon and maybe said that I share a connectivity with driving down the A13, you know. But I just think that when we looked at all of the other evidence that we've been asked to use, that gave me a sense of this works as our way that, you know, there's areas of Harlow that are very, very like areas of Thurrock. You know, there's lots of places there's places in Brentwood that remind me of maybe Alsett, you know. So there is lots and lots of sense of commonalities in the areas that we live in. And I just think that using all of the data, and it was once we see the data sets going over the geographies, it naturally gave us that there is our way to go. I could have done the really easy option and gone, they're my mates in Basildon, let's just go that way. That would have been the easiest thing. That's probably what people were expecting, but it wasn't what was right, and it wasn't what the evidence said led us to. We always said that we would be led by the evidence that gave Thurrock the best sense of making, we can't pretend we haven't got £1 billion worth of debt. So we have to make sure that it's not about just a sense of place, it's about a sense of viability. It's about services that can work. So it's more than just that sense of place. And I just think that the bigger you go, the further you go away from your sense of place. So that was where I got to. You know, I looked at the building and the commonality about green spaces, all of the pressure that we'll get, the M25, the way we live our lives. There was lots of things that sort of came into it. What?
You're saying that the bigger you become, the bigger services move away. You're saying that the option for free unitary authorities moves. It becomes geographic.
Even further. And I think that smaller communities then, there's lots and lots of data and reports been written that you can find them in 2 minutes if you look for them, that the further you go away from your communities, the further you go away from your council, the further people feel away. And we already have it. I mean, how many of us gets told, oh, you up there, you don't even know what it's like to live out here, when actually we do, we live amongst them. So I just think that the bigger we get, the further we get, the spread of the services, you know, I just think that it doesn't work for me. Of all of the 3 that are on the table, 3 is the one that I worry about most, that our residents, our services will get lost, and that we've been there before when we had, that's why we went unitary, because of how we was treated. And I just worry that, you know, there'll be a bit of history repeating itself with 2 other major unitary authorities across Essex, but us being the biggest in the country. I mean, you can't try it for 6 months and go back. This is 30, 40 years. So let's make sure that we've got, you know, a really good 4 on the table. And if the government want it to be 5, there's going to be a 5 on the table. And if they want it to be 3, there'll be a 3 on the table. But I'm determined to make sure that there is a good, viable 4 on the table that works for Essex, not just for Thurrock. It has to work for Essex.
And you think that, it sounds to me that this 4 is really the only one, isn't it? You not, because as I said, I'm not wedded to 3 or 4. I quite like the idea of 4. I just don't like this 4. You don't think there's an opportunity to go away, listening to some of the comments you've heard tonight, and come back with another variation? I know I get what you're saying about the evidence, but there is a concern that it just seems an odd configuration to a lot of people, but you seem quite wedded to the idea that this is the only viable for.
I think that this is the right for on the evidence and the criteria that the government set us and the data sets that they set us. And in the working group, they see all of the other configurations and how they got there. And it started off as lots of 3s, 4s, 5s, you know, 2s. You know, there was even a look at 2 at some point across Essex. And this is the one that when you started looking at all of the other data and all of the other configurations, this is the one that didn't just favour just Thurrock. It has to work for Essex. It's no good having a thriving Thurrock when Rome burns around us. You know, this is about an Essex local government reorganisation, and I just felt that the 3 and the 5 wasn't giving Thurrock its best chance. I was surprised at how they just wiped the 4 out without even looking at it in any real detail. And it alarmed me, actually. So I said, well, actually, there's got to be a piece of work that says, if there's 3 that works and there's 5 that works, maybe there's a 4 that works too. And this is that. And government will make that decision. I'm not making that decision, Councillor Maney. So it will be for public consultation and for then government to make that decision.
Of course, thank you. A quick observation and then one other point, and then we'll move on. I mean, one of the things I'm confused, Harlow and Epping are 28 miles away from Thurrock, Rochford is 19. It seems under this model we're spreading services potentially even further afield than we would be under the 3, but, you know, I don't expect a response to that. The question I was going to put to you, because I've had members not of this committee come to me and say they don't feel like they're being included. They feel like, and I know this is moving very fast. And it's difficult to keep people in, but they're not. They don't just want to be briefed. I think there's an opportunity for an online briefing. They want to be able to comment, debate. Would you be open to the? And again, I know timelines are difficult, but once we know what the final options are that are going to be put forward to government, would you be prepared to hold an extraordinary full council so that ahead of the executive decision, all members can debate the options at full council and cabinet can hear?
There's just not the time to do that, but there is your corporate meeting. You can invite all 49. You know, that's when there'll be much more there. There'll be cabinet. People can come to cabinet. And I started the evening at every councillor, all 49 councillors can go to officers. I will be making sure that my Labour group sees the configuration, sees the works. I'm sure that Councillor Anderson can invite them and your leader can invite them to yours and the Independent can invite the officers to yours. It's sheerly a time element. People are going on annual leaves, officers, you know, it's time. But there is your corporate meeting. You know, if you want people to be in the room, all 49, then, you know, I'm happy to meet any councillor any time, the same as I'm meeting residents. It's sheerly a time element. It's sheerly time.
I get that, as long as you just note that there's a difference between listening to information and asking questions and debating. You can't have a 49-member debate at corporate ONS. And I hear what you're saying. As long as you just note that as chair of corporate ONS, I am receiving comments from members across party who don't feel they have any opportunity to debate, not just come and ask questions or listen to officers telling them or
it's
you.
Time element. We're
That's
up
fine.
against a government timeline. It's not my timeline. I'd love it to be 6 months more and we could have as many meetings as you like. It's a timeline that we're up against, you know, and I think that we as a council here in Thurrock have done much more engagement. We've met with our members. You've got working group, cross-party. If people... I'm surprised that people are coming to you because I haven't had any of my group come to me and say that they don't feel engaged. So, you know, maybe, you know, get your leader to make more meetings, add more meetings online. You know, having all 49 online, it doesn't matter. Just the time element of getting everybody together with officers to do that, it's just not going to work. So I'm sorry, but it's time element with up against a government timetable.
Sure. Okay. We need to move on, I think, because of time constraints. But is there anything anybody wants to specifically recommend at this point? I want to make sure we've captured all views. Is there anything? I know we're going to have another meeting, but is there anything any member wants to put forward as a specific recommendation? Councillor Howden.
just two things. Firstly, just on the articulation of the four, just being extremely careful in terms of how we articulate it. We don't overly promote the idea of a smaller unitary is better and accidentally give credence to the 5 option, because some of the commentary could lead to, if we present 4 as a compromise because we accept the premise of the argument, too big is not what we want, well, actually, it'd be very easy for the proponents of 5 to bolt onto that. So we have to be very careful with that. And yeah, I do appreciate what you say about timing. But if there's one thing that came out of the BVI, it is clarity of decision making. I simply don't see why we can't have a full council and have an indicative vote. So you can see how all 49 members feel about option 4, option 3 and option 2. We've called full councils for extraordinary reasons for dozens of occasions during my time as a councillor. There's absolutely no reason why we can't have a full council in the first week of September, have an indicative vote so all 49 members can express exactly what you want to happen to your communities, and then Cabinet do exactly what Cabinet do. You take the sovereign decision because you have the executive function, but there's no reason that the 49 can't have an indicative vote. And I said the same thing to Councillor Kent, because frankly, if there's one thing that Essex are very good at, it is wielding political power. That there are advantages of having full council. There are advantages of pointing to vigorous debate before decisions are made. So that would be my recommendation, Chair. That before Cabinet vote, I can't see why full council can't have an indicative vote. We can't bind Cabinet. We appreciate that.
You can come and ask questions at Cabinet. It's an open meeting, so if all 49 councillors want to come and sit in Cabinet meeting, but you know it will be an executive decision at the end of the day. But Cabinet is also there, you know, and it will be great to see some people come and ask questions at Cabinet. There's lots of places for people to take part, have their voices heard.
But as you said, with the tightness of the timetable,
and it is the timetable,
with the best will in the
tight.
world, myself, Councillor Fox, Councillor Anderson are not going to turn up at Cabinet and you suddenly smack your brow and say, oh my gosh, they come up with such wonderful thoughts. I'm going to cancel this meeting now. I'm going to send Alex away into a darkened room with a felt tip pen and get him to amend the paper. That's not happening. The only way it works is by having a full council, 5-10 days in advance, having that indicative vote. Clearly the paperwork will be ready because you're saying that we can have a corporate meeting before Cabinet, so the paperwork will clearly be ready. We can have a full council, we can have an indicative vote, everyone gets the right to put their hand up for what option they think best supports their community.
That's a recommendation. I mean, I don't think you couldn't say yes or no here anyway. You have to go away and obviously, but I would echo that. If it's feasible, we should do it. If tomorrow, members using the Constitution called for an extraordinary meeting, it'd have to happen anyway. So Councillor Howden's right. If the will was there, it could happen. And we could, enough members requested it tomorrow, it'd have to happen anyway. So it'd be better if you are in control of that rather than potentially members come forward and say we want an extraordinary meeting. I would second that recommendation. Can we just ask you to at least go away and see whether it's feasible, and if it is, to have it, because you've mentioned Cabinet. Are you going to allow 49 members to come and all speak for 3 minutes at Cabinet if they want to? The answer is no. It's not about asking questions or listening to information. Members want to be able to debate and give their view on them, and not just ask a few questions. And I think that's where we're failing at the moment. We haven't had that opportunity. Well, we have, but other members haven't had that opportunity to have that debate. And I think it's not an unreasonable request just to ask if you go away and just look at outside of this meeting whether it's something that could be accommodated.
Thank you. I'll do that tomorrow, but I am mindful that we put the devolution and local government reform with this extraordinary meeting here into corporate ONS. And if there is a real will for there to be a 49, then you are absolutely within your right to invite all 49 councillors. I said it in full council last time. All 49 councillors, we do it for budget. We could do it for this. We could have an extraordinary ONS meeting in the same way that we do the budget meeting. If there was a will to do it as ONS, then that's absolutely fine. I just haven't got the time, you know, and the diary time, as well as everything else that's going on, to call another council meeting. It just doesn't work. But we do have an ONS where you, Chair, have the ability to be able to invite all 49 members.
But not to debate. I can do. I will do if you want. I'll have a meeting. I'll allow all members to speak for 3 minutes and debate it. But if we can do that for corporate, why can't we do it for full council? The point. So, but I'm happy to forgo our date and have the full council on that date instead. There's a compromise. Our meeting that's scheduled for the 2nd of September, that can be a full council.
It won't be the full business plan. We're up to the wire with the full business plan. We can't bring a full business plan to full council and still be writing the full business plan. It's a timeline. It's everything else. We're already doing so much to involve people. I can't literally bring the full business plan. You've already heard from officers tonight. You know, they're literally paper to pen right up until the final minute.
Right, fine. Councillor Fletcher, you wanted to make a recommendation?
To be honest, just as go back to an earlier point, the narrative, I think, is absolutely vital. Let's not wait till September to see that. The earlier we can see it, the earlier we can give you our thoughts on that. The narrative needs to be rock solid. If that's okay.
Okay, Councillor Green, did you have a recommendation?
No, but I've got a comment.
I think we're at the point of recommendations. I don't want to sort of drag this out. I've got other items on it, but if you're quick, Councillor Watson has indicated to come in. Councillor Watson, before we wrap this up, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm just really confused about the ONS, because budget ONS is a debate. Yes, it is. You sit up there and we debate it.
Not when I'm chairing. I don't allow people to debate. I allow them to ask questions. I've never allowed people to debate.
Well, ONS can have that. It's a public forum, so anybody can arrive at the ONS and run it like you do a budget. But at the moment, we've got the biggest problem going where it is time, and we're sitting in August, and to be honest with you, people are on holiday anyway, and also like members are. So if the members want to have this debate, why don't we move it online then at your ONS?
I think it doesn't matter how many times I say what I say, it doesn't land. Doesn't matter how many times you say what you say, it doesn't land. ONS is not a place where you come and debate a proposal. You come and you scrutinise and you ask questions. Nobody, when I'm chairing the the corporate ONS for budget savings, no one's debated. I don't sit there and allow each member to have 3 minutes and say what they think. I allow them to ask questions. And if they start debating an issue, I'll interject. Corporate ONS is not a place to come and have a debate followed by a vote at the end, even if it's not a binding vote. That's the point I'm trying to make. And it doesn't matter how many times I think we make the point. It just goes, but you can ask your questions there. You can go onto an online briefing. It's not the same as having a debate where all members can listen to each other and feel like they've aired their views and had some influence and placed on public record what they think. But look, it's not, what I'm saying isn't landing. The leader has clearly said she's not, she doesn't believe that's feasible. So, okay, there's a difference of opinion. That's fine. We're allowed to disagree. I think it's doable. Councillor Howden thinks it's doable. You don't. That's fine. We'll disagree on it. So we can debate this all night, but fine. It's just a disagreement. Did you want to come in again?
No, I just think we're debating.
No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't be debating. I'm trying to move it on. Councillor Fletcher, last comment.
Just for clarification, Chair, what I understand the leader has said is that she will look tomorrow to see if it is feasible. So I don't think, let's not go down a rabbit hole of he said, she said. The leader has given a commitment to go look at the feasibility of it. Then let's minute that, and we see where it goes from there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's all we can do. So we're moving on. Item 5 is to note the work programme. Has anybody got any comments or observations on the work programme? Claire?
Thanks, Chair. So the only observation is that since the publication of the agenda, the digital programme business case has moved to the October meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything people want added to the work programme? And Councillor Fletcher?
Sorry, I know, me again. He's going me up, not you again. I was just thinking, perhaps, given that we've put all our sort of energies into devolution or whatever, might it be an idea that we go away, have a think about it, and get back to yourself? Because there probably are some other things. I had a think this afternoon, and nothing brilliant came to mind, except the local plan, which may not even sit within our remit. So I know, but yeah, there's okay. I will. Certainly, what I'd like to do is drop you a note and say, here's what I think.
I think that's very sensible. I think I say after any meeting, if outside of the meeting people do have things that they want added to the work programme, or there are changes they think they can be made, yeah, you don't have to wait for the meeting. Please come back to either myself or Claire or anyone in Dem Services. Thanks for that, Councillor. Item 6, action log. Any comments? Noted.
Yeah.
And item 7, recommendations tracker, page 31 again. Noted.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And I will now close the meeting at 9:25. Thanks, everyone, for your attendance.